Okay, hi everybody. It's Helen Taylor here. Um, for our little weekly update, I'm here with Kath.
Hi.
And we're going to have a conversation this morning. We've been doing more book writing, and it's kind of getting a bit funky, isn't it? It's like a funky kind of space. Just doesn't feel like progress, but I think that's just what happens with projects, doesn't it?
You got to go in it and through it, and eventually you come out.
Yeah, because it kind of feels like we're treading water at the moment. But that's okay. That's where it's at. That's what it's doing. Yeah. But yesterday, when we were looking at that, there were just some little mannerisms, some behaviour, some ways that 25 years ago I was addressing myself and my situations that I still hold in good stead all these years later. There's still little anecdotes and things that worked for me then and still work for me now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just thought that maybe we could share them because I think that I can only tell my story and hope that there's bits and pieces of it that help everybody else along the way. Yeah. And I'm sure there's some bits and pieces in this today that will help you in any current situation that you've got. Yeah. So what I wanted to share is just some, I call them attitudes and behaviours, because our attitude pretty much dominates whatever's going on for us at the time, doesn't it?
Yes. I say it that way because I think it does, whether it's conscious or not.
So as we've been making our way through my story, there's been certain things, certain practices I put into place. So one was slowing down, because I was just smart enough to know that if I was going too fast with too much going on in my life and too much going on in my head, then you miss the cues. You miss the signposts. You miss the signs. Does that sound right?
It does, but the question is, what does slowing down mean? What's a tangible example of that?
When I slow down, it's a little bit like this. I think that if we are thinking too much and going too fast and have too much going on, if you imagine, I'm going to call it God, you can make it whatever it is that you want. But if we're wanting some guidance or some help, so our instincts or our intuition to tune in, I've always imagined it like God's got a direct phone line to me. And if I'm wanting guidance or help, if I'm too busy in my mind and got too much going on, God just gets an engaged signal. Right? And it's only when I sit down quietly that sometimes insight will happen. Yeah, like a thought will drop in that helps me with whatever the current situation is. So I always saw that if I don't slow down or sit still, then the phone's engaged. And God's going, I'm trying to get through to you, but you're not picking up.
So you can do the slowing down and the sitting still, but you can still have a mind going a million miles an hour too.
Well, that's unfortunate, isn't it? And it's a point, it's a good point. But there has to be, you're setting a goal for yourself, and the goal is to change that. Right? And it doesn't happen overnight at all, but it does happen.
Well, I was listening to Joe Dispenza, and he was talking about how people sit in meditation and then their mind wanders off, and then they come back, and then their mind wanders off, and then they come back, and how people are like, well, I'm really terrible at doing meditation. And he's like, no, you're doing exactly the right thing that you need to do whilst you're doing meditation. Because the point is that you are actually controlling your mind. You are actually putting in effort, and you're reprogramming by just that simple act of, hang on a second, my mind's actually wandered and I'm thinking about where I shouldn't be.
Well, let's just take that one more step. You're becoming the observer and you're watching what it does. Instead of being engaged with it, you just, because meditation, to think that you're going to sit and you're going to stop thinking is an absolute crock.
Yeah.
You know, I really think it was just another program put out there to make people feel like they weren't good enough or were a failure at trying to do something like that. Because I don't think that's what the agenda is. Meditation is about sitting still, about learning how to sit still. And through that process, you start to take charge of your body and your mind, slowly but surely. So you become the observer. You get to a point where you are watching your mind go back and forward and chitter and chatter. And if you allow that to happen, sooner or later, there's little spaces in between. Yeah. Sooner or later, something else starts to happen. But we have to be dedicated to ourselves, I think, in order to get there. So slowing down was one of the things. Watching my thoughts, it's funny because that's the next thing I wrote down, right? And we've just addressed that, watching your thoughts. You know, if you're not aware of how you're thinking, how can you change it? Yeah. So how can you become aware? You've got to catch yourself. And I still can't put into words how I did that, how I knew to do that. Do you know how to do that?
Well, not entirely. I think part of it is by being aware that there is almost many voices in the mind. The question is which is a true voice and which is just mindless chatter or a program or things like that. And I think that only comes about by reflection. And that's where the power of reviewing and reflecting back on choices you made and thoughts and what you were thinking at the time and why you went down that particular path.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Review, right? If you can look back at your day and see what went right and what didn't go so well, then you start to catch where the mind has been in charge.
Yes.
It's been taken over. There was something else that I just had in mind about that, but it's just gone out my mind.
Which is the ultimate place you want to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you want to review, absolutely. You know, if you are not aware of what you're thinking, then it's got the driver's seat.
And I think it's also even that you're not what you think you're thinking. Like, it's like the stories and the voices, like, you know, something as simple as, oh my God, I look really fat today, you know, when you look in the mirror or something. That's not you. That's just a voice. That's just a program. That's a something. But we let it dictate our attitude. We let it dictate our choices in life. And
well, the thought creates a chemical response, right?
Yeah.
And then that just starts to flow different things through our body. And what you were just saying then, the point that I wanted to make, that thought that escaped out, it's back. How do you know? You said there's all these different voices, but how do you know which is you in all of that? And we talked about this the other day.
Yeah.
If your thoughts aren't loving and kind and supporting you, then they're not you. They're programs. They're either old versions of you or programs of what you've been taught. That's always been my definitive line in the sand. If it's not supporting and encouraging me, then it's not me.
So is that like an important part of the review process? It's like, when in my day was I being driven by not loving, supportive voices?
Yeah, absolutely. There's all different ways to look at it, and you're just going to find, like, as I said to you all at the beginning of this, I'm just going to tell a story, and I hope you find something in this story that helps you, right? So yeah, that's certainly another way of the review, looking at it and going, you know, was I loving and supportive? I mean, it's like catching your conversations, or reviewing your conversations that you've had. Was that a loving, supportive one? Was it directed towards what I want in my world and what I want to create, or not?
Well, and it can also be when you're having a conversation with someone, is this a productive piece of information to add to that conversation?
Correct.
Or does it just stir the pot? Or does it, you know, like, what's coming out of your mouth? Think about it before it comes out.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the major word in all that is gossip.
Mm.
I mean, that's just a word, but there's a whole heap of other conversations that we have that aren't really creating something constructive.
No.
And something that we really want in our world.
Yeah.
If every word that you were saying and every thought that you were having was creating your tomorrow, then when you're doing the review, that's how I was looking at it. What am I creating?
Mm. Are you creating a pot of stinky muck?
Yes. Yeah. Do you want more of that tomorrow and then the next day? Yeah, I think the reviewing was holding me accountable
Mm.
and going, I might be in this situation, which back 25 years ago, I certainly saw things as problems. You've got this problem. How are you going to deal with it? And the review was just helping me look at other ways to deal with it. And the next thing I wrote down was about the mirrors. And I think this is a topic that sometimes pisses people off.
Mm.
To consider that everything on the outside of you is a reflection of the inside of you is a really big pill to swallow. It doesn't mean it's not the truth, but it's a bloody big pill to swallow, because if you see somebody turning up in front of you and they're a judgmental, argumentative piece of work and you kind of go, I'm not that.
Yeah.
But 25 years ago, what I was writing about was that very thing, that I was seeing aspects of myself in the people around me. And it helped me to not judge them. And more importantly, look at, well, if that's me, then what do I do about that? If those traits are me, how do I handle it?
Mm.
And that just made me go deeper into myself and go, well, if that was me, how did I really want to be treated? And again, that's a big pill to swallow too, because if you've got someone not being real nice to you, it's not always easy in action to love them. Like go up and go, hey, you're ranting at me like a raving lunatic because you hate me. Can I have a hug?
Yeah, rather large.
Yeah.
Hole to jump.
Yeah. But I think we touched on it yesterday too, when I said to you, like sometimes when I see somebody's behavior, and it still happens to me now, there'll be, a voice in my head that goes, oh, look, I just want to tell her to shut up.
Mm.
But, I'm wise enough now to go, oh, I heard that first thought. Okay. All right. So, there's something going on here. How can I better address that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what I was doing with the mirrors, that mirroring situation all those years ago, was starting to push myself to how can I handle that person better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's always, we've talked a lot about this, just the two of us chatting about the rites of passage, and it's like you do it a little bit better that next time.
Yeah.
And then the next time it's a little bit better. It's not like you're instantly going to change your personality.
Yeah. Or you might screw it up the next time.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
And, that's where I've had to have a sense of humour. That's sort of what I've relied on to, I think, that breaks the ice and breaks the situation a little bit, but I'd use it internally with myself too, to go, don't be too hard on yourself, right? Just, be a bit more curious about what's going on. Because you would mess up, you do. And then you go, okay, I see that I did that. So how can I mend it? How can I fix it? How can I be better the next time?
Yeah.
So you do, you get to a point where now I can see it for what it is and I'll internally address it. And then when I internally address something, the outside usually changes.
Yes.
And there's not the issue there anymore. Or I've just got a better way of addressing it. Nowadays, if I see something turning up outside of me, my rule of thumb is, how can I educate that other person? Because that other person is me. Yeah. So if I can use a way to help educate somebody else to address something that's going on, that is just me helping me.
So can you give us an example from your book on a situation where you changed inside and that was reflected in the people around you?
So when I started on the spiritual path, yeah, I did a lot of work on myself and I started addressing my anger and whatnot. And as I started to change on the inside, it's a bit like, I think some people might be able to relate to somebody giving up smoking.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like when a smoker quits and then goes out with a whole bunch of smokers, all the smokers feel a little uncomfortable because there's one person that's not smoking anymore, and that highlights what they're doing. So they then kind of go, oh, here, just have one. Like, we're just having a drink or we're just out, just one. And I mean, I remember that when I stopped smoking, some people would try to encourage me to have a cigarette because it was going to make them feel better in the situation. So when someone stops doing something, it seems to flag it for everybody else. So when I stopped getting as angry as I was, when I'd go to a family event, I didn't realise that it was kind of perturbating or pushing buttons of everybody else in the family. And on one occasion, I went round for, a barbecue or something that the family was having. And my sisters were there, my brother was there with his wife, and my mum and dad. And, I'd just been having conversations with people. And I think looking back, I was probably talking about the spiritual work I was doing. Because, I mean, when you're doing something for yourself and it feels fantastic, you just want to share it around. So I was just sharing it around. And I didn't realize that it was pushing the buttons of not only my family, but certainly my sister-in-law. And we were standing in the kitchen and she came around the corner into the kitchen and ran across the room ready to punch me fair and square between the eyes. And I had no idea. And my brother came in sort of out of left field and grabbed her just before she was about to connect with my face and took her out of the house. And for me, that was an example of, firstly, how my internal work and change was affecting the people around me. My sisters and my mum ran out the back door and I went out to see if my mum was okay because she had been crying. And my sister said something really significant to me. She just looked at me and said, why don't you go back to who you were? Right? So move forward. And I mean, this took a matter of months, but I was having different conversations with my parents and really just asking them to look at what had happened and, talking to them about the changes that were happening in me and what was going on in my life. And slowly but surely, I started to rebuild a different sort of relationship with each of them. Even to the point where my dad got really angry and wouldn't talk to me for a little while. But then here we fast forward, say, 12 months, and he happens to be in hospital, and he specifically calls me in to give him a massage and to connect with him. And for the first time in his life, to me, he's gone, thanks so much for doing that. I really appreciate that. And I'm like, this man was starting to internally change as well. And my mum was starting to have different conversations with me. So she was internally changing too.
Yeah, but they weren't on a spiritual path.
No.
They weren't doing the work that you were doing.
Yeah.
It was just you doing the work created this different environment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible, isn't it?
It's amazing.
Yeah. And I think that's what my going back into my story is starting to show, that, the power of, you want to change something internally for yourself for the better. It absolutely has a ripple effect, but you can't have an expectation on, hey, they're all going to change overnight and they're all going to love you too, or that they're going to love you in a particular way. Because, my dad was a really stoic man and, very sort of shut down, walled off. And, to get him like actually asking for my help and then appreciating the connection that we made was extraordinary. I never saw that coming. Yeah.
It's not up to you to predict how your change is going to influence the people around you.
And that's my point.
Yeah.
That's my point. I think I've said it so many times over the years. It's like, be prepared to change, because when you do, the outcome is always beautiful.
Yeah.
Always. I have not made a change in my life and gone, oh shit, I wish I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just propelled me to keep making those changes as well.
But it doesn't mean the change was comfortable.
No, but it gets more comfortable. But yeah, back in those years, 25 years ago, I'm talking about, yeah, boy. I think that's a loaded word. Oh, boy, right? Yeah, there was a lot going on. And it was very, very lonely because it's all going on within you.
Mm.
And usually there's nobody around you that even understands that.
Yeah.
Let alone you can have a good old conversation just to kind of feel a bit of support there or encouragement. You know, it can be lonely at times, but not always. Yeah.
And I think too, like there's that foraging a new path, you know, you and others, as many before. So the path is getting wider and getting easier to change. Like, as in, it's still always an internal journey, but we're not hacking through the jungle like we used to anymore.
Well, I just think of it as, you know, this is a three-dimensional world here. And if you're bringing something ethereal, something, you know, with a different frequency or vibration, it's like pouring it through this really fine funnel, you know, and it's like it just takes a little bit of time and action, you know, doing it again and again and again to start to build it into this reality. And then it reaches a certain point where it's like, now it's easy.
Yeah.
Now it's easy.
Now there's a huge hole instead of a tiny little
pinprick.
Yeah.
I think it's like, well, it's the same thing as riding a bike, right? You don't just jump on it and go, yeah, I've done it. There's difficulty.
Yeah.
There's difficulty as you're starting to learn, and then you get to a certain point where you're like, I can ride a bike.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And then you never forget.
And then you never forget. Yeah, it's exactly the same. So it's difficult when you first start doing it. But as I started doing it, I said earlier, you know, I saw them as problems. I had another problem. I had another something to sort out. For 15 years, I have not had problems. To me, it's just life. And if I want something better for myself, I have to be prepared to change. And I have to be prepared to work through it. But it certainly has more ease to it than it ever did back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the groundwork was done. Yeah. Attitude and behaviour.
Yeah. So what's first, the attitude and then the behaviour, or behaviour and then the attitude?
Either or. Either or. Because my motto has always been, if I wanted a change, there has to be some more love in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, for me, it was always, do I love everything and everyone on the outside more? If there were times where I couldn't love myself, I just couldn't. So I would love everybody around me. It was kind of a game I play with myself. Well, love everything on the outside because I can't love on the inside. But then there were other times where I deeply loved on the inside, and then I'd do that and focus on that and see it affect the outside.
Yeah.
So either or, you can change your behaviour and then watch what happens to your attitude.
Well,
so
I mean,
change your attitude and watch what happens to your behaviour.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it is something as simple as when you're in a foul mood. Like when I was growing up, my brother was, he would just be, I get angry and annoyed or whatever, and he would just make me laugh. And he just had the magic button to make me laugh, and it would just transform everything. And I couldn't hold on to that space anymore because
it would break the mindset.
Yeah, yeah. And so joyous, doing things you love and joyous things can also be a really powerful way of changing your attitude when you're stuck in a funk or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, because we had this conversation this morning. You were like, I'm just like, just stop thinking that way. And you're like, it's not that easy. And I'm like, but it is. It is. And I think that's why I created the joker or the clown or that aspect of myself, because that helped me remove myself from being so bloody serious. Because the mind would get so serious about stuff, and then there was just no room for anything else. So
I know their mind's like, the end of the world is coming. You're right on the precipice. You know, like
Yeah,
this is
doom,
it. Yeah.
doom. Absolutely, and there's no way out.
Yeah, it's all finite.
Yeah, and I think that's why I created that clown or that joker so I could bring her in and deal with that sometimes to break up the mindset, because I was always very strong-minded. And you know, over the years, there's times where I've got onto a tram track and it's like I don't even know I'm on that bloody tram track until, you know, there's something lying across the track or something, and I go, oh shit, yeah. I think the best example of that was, remember when I did that juice fast, and I'd never done a juice fast before. So I'm days into it, and I'd rung up some place about doing a colonics. And she said, well, what are you doing? I said, I'm doing a juice fast at the moment. And she said, how much water are you having? And I went, water? The instructions didn't say anything about water. And she goes, oh my God, yes, you're supposed to be having water. That's what would happen to my mind sometimes.
Yeah.
And it still does sometimes, you know, and it's just, I don't know, just having fun with it. It's like, you know, when you catch yourself, you just go, what a stupid thing to be doing. Okay, note to self, yeah, need water with a juice fast and move on.
Anything else to add today?
I don't think so. I think we're done, aren't we?
I think we're done.
Gosh, I hope that really helps you guys out there. I hope there's some little bit that you can take away from the struggles and trials and tribulations we've been through, and see whether you can find some gold in it.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks so much. See you.
Bye.